Hello, my name is Stanley Heller. Welcome to The Struggle. The Struggle is shown in over 30 cable stations from Vermont to New York City, on the internet at thestruggle.org, our YouTube channel, Struggle Video Media. We start with some relatively good news about Palestinian-Jordanian activist Amer Jubran, who has been in prison on heavy political charges in Jordan since May of 2014. His defense committee writes, in January, Jordan's state security court reduced Amer's sentence from 10 years to 6 years. Current Jordanian law states that actual prison time can be additionally reduced by 25% for good behavior. This, along with time served already, means that Amer may still have to serve another 2 years and 8 months in prison. In December, Amer was moved to a prison that's an hour and a half away from his family. He gets only 10 minutes with each family member when he's allowed visits. Though the sentence by Jordan's state security court was reduced, it is still not just. A verdict that is solely based on a coerced confession under torture should be overturned. Amer Jubran has done nothing wrong. He should be set free. For more about the case, see Amer Jubran's defense campaign at freeamer.wordpress.com. We have neglected Gaza in reporting lately. We came across this video from the Israeli human rights group B'Tselem about Gaza. It was filmed late last fall.
البيت اللي أنا ولدت فيه وعشت فيه قضيت يوم بيوم فيه مع أهلي وإخواتي. طبعا اللي ذكريات كتير فيه، ذكريات حلوة أو ذكريات مرة. هذه كانت غرفتي هنا، كانت هنا بس هالقد عملوها حطوا فيها غرام خاصة فيها يعني.
وين السرير كان سريرك؟
كان السرير مكانه هون هيك بالطول.
خزانتي
كانت من الجهة هاي، كان اللي هون مكتب أدرس عليه هاي الجهة تقريبا. نيتي إنه يعيدوا بناء البيت تبعنا اللي انهدم ونرجع نسكن فيه أنا وماما وأخوتي زي ما كنا زمان.
Gaza is still under siege, of course. I haven't heard the very latest, but up till a couple months ago, not a single private dwelling had been rebuilt in Gaza since the horrific attack by Israel in 2014. Now we go back to the unknown war, that of the Saudi-US attack on Yemen, courtesy of MiddleEastEye.net.
lives lost, but not just those engaged in fighting. This child tries to recount what happened to him just hours earlier. He and his friends were gathered around a water delivery truck when they were hit by a Houthi shell. Some of his friends died. Many are critically wounded.
TSVN plans to cover the conference on Saudi Arabia in Washington, D.C. on March 5th and 6th. Hopefully, there will be attention to all the unsavory partners of the Saudis and U.S. in their war of aggression. Egypt's record is well known, but that of Sudan may be slipping from memory. When it was useful, Israel and the West were thundering at Sudanese government outrages in Darfur. But now that Sudan has joined with Saudi Arabia in ravaging Yemen, Darfur is just a memory. Here are some of the speakers at the conference in D.C. For more, go to saudius.org. TSVN was fortunate to be invited to the opening exhibition of Mohamad Hafez, who is a Syrian artist and architect. The exhibition was at the Hartz Gallery in New Milford, Connecticut. Hafez began by making three-dimensional streetscapes with leftover pieces from his architectural models. Hafez creates haunting pieces, combining beauty and protests from models of the rubble of Syria. Hafez gave a talk about his life and his work and the difficulty one has going to and from Syria from the United States if your name is Mohammed.
Thank you. Thank you everybody for coming here, for taking the time to be with us. I'm very, very honored to be here and to be able to stand where I am, talk to you about my country, particularly in this difficult times that my country Syria is living and the globe is living as well. We have a little bit of a global conscious problem, I think. 13 years ago, I went to the American Embassy in Damascus as a young, naive kid that wanted to apply, actually 14 years ago, wanted to apply for his visa and to go after my dream, to come to the United States, to get my architectural degree, just like my 2 other siblings did since the 90s. My family, I'm honored to be joined with my father, Dr. Hafez here, who made all his best to get us the best education we can have, and that was the greatest gift he's given us. So he sent us to the United States to get our education. My 2 siblings that are 14 years older than me had started this family tradition. We've been visiting them since 1990, so it was common sense that I follow in 2003 to secure my education as well. And back in the days, that was post 9/11. And I hit a wall because at the embassy, I was judged for the first time by my nationality, by my name, and by my religion. It was actually told to me directly that you strike few red chords. Your name is Mohammed, you're Syrian, you're Muslim, it's post 9/11. Son, if I were to advise you, enroll in the Syrian University, because this might not happen. And sure, it took 1.5 years to clear my name for my Syrian visa to come here to the United States. And I did enroll in the Syrian University. Actually, I was in electrical engineering. It was stifling. And very not artistic. No, that's not what I dreamt about, and not what I wanted to be. Until my name cleared 1.5 years later, and I jumped on it. I just came to the United States, and I pursued that dream from the get-go. Not knowing that 4 or 5 years later, I would also get entrapped into a severe homesickness state. Because again, I was judged as, okay, you're here in the United States, you're a Muslim, you're a Syrian student, great, but if you visit your family in Damascus, you have to apply again. You have to enroll into the visa progress again and wait 1.5 years to clear your name. So, of course, I did not take the chance, and I never went back home for 8 years. I got really homesick, and I missed home. I skipped my siblings' weddings, nephews' birthdays, nieces, all the opportunity in my family. And that was pre-war. This was in 2004, 2005. Syria was blossoming, but I was stuck in college. So what I first started is as an architecture student, I started collecting the scraps my peers throw away from model making, because we would stay up all night making models for architecture projects, and I would collect all the wood and whatnot. And one night, out of just pure boredom, I put stuff together, and it started to look like a piece of home. And I remember that I still have that piece. I could never let go of that piece. It looked like a piece of Damascus. And I fully realized the potential of where this could head. So out of homesickness, I started making streetscapes and models of old Damascus, Syria. This was my work in 2004, 2005, when the war did not start. The country was fantastic. Everything was fine, but I was homesick. So I started doing all this work. And little by little, I graduated. I went to work for an international architecture firm who I respect and love everybody there. In fact, we have a house full of architects today here, so if you ever need a project, they're all, they're here. And that, I say that because the partners of this firm are kind gentlemen that were very good to every one of us. And they approached me one day and said, Mohammed, we have a project in Beirut, Lebanon. You're leading that project. And I say, well, gentlemen, again, I'm Muslim, Syrian, Mohammed. I'm on H1 working visa now, and I can't go home that easily. I said, no, don't worry about it. We're going to take care of you. You're going to go present this project and come back. And, it's going to take a week or two, worst case scenario, to stamp your visa back on the passport. And I said, gentlemen, remember, Syrian, Muslim, Mohammed. Good God. And they said, listen, just go, we got you, whatever happens, happens. And I went, after 8 years of getting stuck here, I finally presented with the opportunity to go back home. And I jumped on it, and I did my best, and we had a fantastic architectural presentation. And I went to Damascus, Syria, because Beirut is an hour away drive. And I went to the American Embassy and applied. And they said, okay, we have to run the security background check, and you wait. So, all right. How long would it take? Oh, we don't know. Maybe 1, 2 days, maybe 6 months. 6 months? I have work. I have a company that's waiting for me in the United States. Not our problem. See ya. Okay. What happened is I got stuck again for 1.5 months in Syria, waiting for my visa to get stamped. My mother is getting fairly, worried about this. Is he going back to the United States? Is this it? Is his whole career thrown out of the window? Where are we going with this? I was in heaven, quite frankly, because I was back home and I was enjoying every moment of it. And I was so homesick that I walked all the streets of old Damascus and Aleppo and started recording people left and right. I started recording the call to prayer from mosques. That audio, that moment of peace that today is no longer existent, I stumbled upon literally 5 years later in the middle of the war when I started doing all my political work about Syria. Yes, my work has started to be political. It took a different aesthetic, but then I infused the status of Syria before the war. So the recordings that you find in my pieces are actually moments where I walked around the city, recorded people, recorded normal conversations in cafes, normal street conversations, call to prayer in Damascus. All of these are no longer existent. In fact, they're substituted with what you hear in the float piece there. That's how it feels to be under Syrian sky. And why I'm saying this? Because, sure. And why am I telling you this? It's because if you meet me on the street, if you meet me in my job, you wouldn't think that, Muhammad is crazy or scary. You say, oh, this is a fine gentleman. He's an architect. He's designing, in fact, one of our buildings. But the system judges on nationality. The system judges on the passport color. Today, the system judges if you are a Syrian refugee, but just by passport. And I've been in that spot. And I've been judged many times on my passport. And that's why I do work like this, is to show the world who the Syrian people are. Who are these people that we're trying to stop from coming here, from giving them a second chance? What amount of devastation does it take a father to put his 3-year-old son in the middle of a float to cross the Mediterranean, knowing that 90% chance that float is capsizing in the middle of the sea? What is that state of mind? What does that amount of desperation feel like? And that's why I do my work. And that's why it's important for me to do my fair bit of giving back. In fact, today, my wife and I work closely with 20 refugee families that have arrived in the United States and settled. And I can't tell you there's anything more rewarding in that experience. The food that's been cooked today has been made by our beautiful friends that are present here today, the Salumi family, that are also Syrian refugee families. I have the merchandise in that corner are all made by Syrian refugee families that came here. These are people just like us with aspirations, with dreams, with things to live for. We can't judge 23 million people by their book, by the color of their passport. Today we will be joined by my dear friend Mustafa al-Bakri, who came from Iraq, and he plays the oud magnificently. Today we have Nizar, who is a Syrian glass artist. His work is fantastic. This is what I hope, I'm only one voice in this world, but I'm one voice that is talking to 200 tonight. And I do this because I hope one day, if somebody hears a demagogue or a crazy rhetoric somewhere, that he would stop him and say, you know what you're saying is really not American, because I met a Muhammad, and he's Muslim, and he's Syrian, and he's an architect, and he's a fine gentleman, and he's a fine American citizen.
You'll be able to see his exhibit in New Milford, Connecticut for most of February, and another of his exhibits at Yale University's Silliman College this same month. For details, go to our website or peace.org. Continuing terrible news about Syria. Doctors Without Borders reports that a dozen people succumbed in Madaya despite 3 convoys full of UN food that made it through the siege. Now Russian bombing has allowed Assad and Hezbollah forces to encircle Aleppo, and hundreds of thousands now are under siege. From Amnesty International, part of a talk given by journalist and author Robin Yassin-Kassab in conversation with Christian Benedict, campaign manager at Amnesty International UK, to mark the release of Burning Country, Syrians in Revolution and War by Robin Yassin-Kassab and Leila Al-Shami.
Julie, for instance, engineering student from Homs. At first I was scared to join in, but one day there was a very big demonstration which came from 2 directions, from the old part and the new part of Al-Wad. When I heard the chanting, the people want, and the singing, I started crying. Suddenly I was filled with courage, and I picked myself up and walked out to join in. My mother tried to stop me, but I went anyway. Beautiful experience. I felt at last I was participating in the effort to lift the oppression off us. Before that, I used to be scared to talk even in front of my friends. I even cheered for Bashar at the university during his first speech to the People's Assembly. Can you imagine? Something I regret very much now. And Yara Nasser, a Christian from Damascus. There was such a positive atmosphere. It sounds incredible, but suddenly everyone had good ethics. People stood together. Their slogans were very beautiful. Remember, this is a people who'd been brainwashed and kept apart for decades, victims of a failed education system, a failed social system. In this context, what the people did was amazing. I went to Meydan to protest. It's a conservative Muslim neighbourhood, and I was wearing a skimpy top. One young man asked me, politely enough, to dress more appropriately when I came next. But his friend said, no, sister, you wear whatever you like. Whatever you like. We're here for our freedom, after all. We really were ready to transform into an open society. We had great momentum. Syrians were discovering themselves and their country anew. They were learning the names of towns and villages they'd never previously heard of. Places like Kefarenda, which produced banners, slogans and cartoons each week. Seeing familiar places in fresh ways. Homs, though it is ancient Mesa, used to be a nondescript city beside an oil refinery and the butt of 1,000 jokes. Now it was the capital of the revolution, a noble city to be praised and emulated. Competition and resentment between cities and regions was the old normality. Suddenly people in one place, were chanting their solidarity with others. O Homs, they sang, or Dera, or Benyas, or Dera Zor, with you until death. And Arabs learnt the Kurdish word for freedom, Azadi. In endless spiral, protests met by gunfire led to funerals, which led to larger protests, which led to more funerals. Everybody on the streets now called for revolution, not reform. Protesters were seen raising their right hands to swear to continue the struggle until the regime was toppled, no matter what befell them. By attending protests and speaking out, hundreds of thousands had burnt their bridges with a regime brooking no dissent. By principle and for reasons of survival, millions were committed to destruction, by peaceful means if possible. What remained was to build an alternative. And then in the next chapter, which focuses on the alternative, extract, Omar Aziz, fondly known to friends as Abu Kamil, was born in Damascus. An economist, anarchist, husband and father, he returned from exile in 2011 at the age of 63 and committed himself to the revolution. Working with locals to distribute humanitarian aid to suburbs under regime attack, he was inspired by the diverse actions he came across, the various forms of protest, as well as the solidarity and mutual aid within and between communities, including voluntary provision of emergency medical and legal support, turning homes into field hospitals, and food collection. Saw in such acts, quote, the spirit of the Syrian people's resistance to the brutality of the systematic killing and destruction of communities. Aziz believed that protests alone were insufficient to bring about a radical transformation. A new society had to be built from the bottom up to challenge authoritarian structures and transform value systems. He produced a paper in the revolution's 8th movement was still largely peaceful and before land was liberated, which he advocated the establishment of local councils. These were envisaged as horizontally organised grassroots forums in which people could work together to achieve three primary goals: to manage their lives independently of the state, to collaborate collectively, to initiate a social revolution locally, regionally and nationally. He proposed that councils network to foster solidarity and mutual aid and to share experience. Aziz helped establish the first local council in Zabadani and then others in Barze, Daraya and Douma. Omar Aziz didn't live to witness the extent of the challenges that would beset Syria's revolutionary.
That's our program for today. I'm Stanley Heller for The Struggle.